Travis, we've just been having a discussion on the nature of the extraterrestrials and what an extremely advanced race, how they would behave. And I just wanted him to reveal what he said to us, to the rest of the group. Travis?
Well, you know, I was kind of commenting on, you know, how common it is for people to think that there's some kind of sinister thing going on here, that their reason for not making open contact is because they have bad intentions. But, you know, it's not original with my brother, but he was even quoted as saying, if they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it long ago, and there'd be nothing we could do to stop it. You know, it would be so easy for them to surgically remove just humans if that was their intention. You know, and there's 100 ways they could do that. But they haven't, and I really don't think that, this is just my own personal thinking. I've had, you know, almost 40 years to think about it. I was saying that I believe that it's almost goes hand in hand, that with an extremely advanced technology, that you would have the moral and ethical development would necessarily have to keep pace with that. Because if it didn't, they would destroy themselves. They would have weaponry and all sorts of technology to do so much more damage than we would do. So if they've survived that long, they're probably moral and ethical to go with it. I was also talking about how the skeptics say if this was real, they would just land on the White House lawn and announce their presence, you know. And that didn't work out too good. Back in the 50s, there was UFOs over Washington, D.C., and they scrambled the fighter planes. So the greetings weren't too friendly. But not that they would probably be even vulnerable to any weaponry we had. I was talking with these folks here about how there's another end of the spectrum, that they are actually, with their technology, capable of doing everything they're doing here and remaining completely undetected. You know, if the NSA knows where every camera is or where every cell phone is, you know, certainly a technology 100 million years advanced could easily do everything they're doing here and remain completely cloaked. And they're not doing either one. And so the question was why? It's no accident that it's where it is. If they really intended to remain undetected, they could. So I think what's happening is a gradual conditioning process that's always just short of the kind of absolute proof that would cause widespread panic or destruction. Now, sometimes people at gatherings like this find it hard to understand why there would be that kind of destructive reaction, because we'd take it in stride, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't go to work tomorrow if that were to happen. And, you know, there'd be all kinds of chaos within financial institutions, political, social, you know, just the basic fabric of life amongst humans would be extremely disrupted. So it's in our best interest that they steer clear. It's, you know, science fiction came up with the idea of the prime directive, that they're not going to interfere with, and it's a logical concept that they would avoid that kind of thing, because they're not going to hand us technology that we would just almost certainly turn around and use to destructive effect. That would be, you know, handing us the gun to shoot ourselves in the head. And so I do think that there's probably certain things they can do that don't violate that. Nudging us in the direction of greater understanding of facts we already know but don't really incorporate into, you know, a better way of relating to each other or better way of functioning here on the earth. But for the most part, they have to avoid that kind of contact because it would be harmful to us. And I'm thinking, well, maybe even our governments are sort of participating in that. Maybe to the extent, to some extent, not just covering up for their own cover-up, but also knowing, you know, how destructive it might be if they did open the files. So I've said, oh, I applaud the whole idea of the disclosure movement. You know, it probably, you know, is helping in the long run to get people ready. And that's the I hope, the higher purpose or outcome of gatherings like this, to push us, the whole society, towards being ready for acknowledging that there's other technologies out there. And, you know, we're not ready at all, you know, in so many ways. But we can get ready, and we're, you know, we're making progress in that direction. And that's what I hope to accomplish by coming out and doing this kind of stuff. So we were going to take some more questions. Jennifer Stein has put a lot of work into this, drawing on many sources, and it's been a work of passion for her, and I think it shows in the product, you know, and there was a lot of collaboration from a lot of people, and it's still a work in progress. There's some refinements that are going to be made, and you know, and a minor roadblock that will be overcome, but just by taking out the part that the guy, we went ahead and made the film, and then he's all of a sudden saying, however, if you use this, you can never show it publicly. You can never let it be shown in theater or on television, which is just totally absurd. There was one misquote where it was stated that the polygraph is not admissible in court, when it is, and that's going to be redone. But other than that, I really don't have anything negative to say about it. A lot of good material in there. And it was in a competition with a number of other films, so 4 or 5 other films, and it won both classes, the People's Choice Award and what was the other? But 2 of them there at the International UFO Congress. They've all, you know, had their own separate experiences. You know, 2 of the men that were teetotalers became drinkers, and one that wasn't really into drinking all that much got deeper into it as a way of trying to deal with it. But they all had their different ways of interpreting it, and we didn't really stay in touch, or, you know, people say you're friends, but they were my coworkers, you know, but we weren't all friends. There was some serious antagonisms amongst us at the same time. But everybody, you know, had their own set of difficulties dealing with people's reaction to it. Well, I don't like to talk about that kind of stuff, but there were some changes, you know, things that. But you know, who can say whether it was just the incredible experience pressing you to become a different person in order to cope with it, or, you know, changes that were made sort of as a side effect of just healing the damage. Well, in the immediate aftermath, I underwent a whole battery of medical tests, and one of those was an EEG. And there was an odd pattern that the technician had mentioned in his report. And he didn't know who I was, so he didn't know anything about the experience. It was just, you know, a neuroscientist that was told to look for signs of injury. And so that was mentioned in there. So the plan is to go back and repeat another EEG, compare the old one with the new one, and also to take the old report and have a neuroscientist look at it in terms of how does this correlate with someone who, you know, may have had a powerful electric shock or a lightning strike, something like that. I had upper body x-rays and nothing was detected. And I described what the physician noted with the little red spot on my arm. And somebody said, well, take a really powerful magnet and pass it over that area. And I did, and I didn't feel anything. So I really don't think there's any. That would have been in the x-ray too. So I don't think there's any implants. Well, that's interesting, a good question, because people say that there's a high incidence of Rh negative with people that have interactions with him. But I always thought I would be positive. However, my daughter, my youngest daughter, who has definite biological markers, you know, as being my child, she's Rh negative. So I would like to get us both retested because her midwife and my youngest boy's wife, they had the same midwife, and I'm just wondering if they got their samples mixed up or whatever. So it's good to follow up on that. And, you know, who knows? Maybe my blood type was changed, you know, from positive to negative. Had a comprehensive blood test. It was totally normal. And it's ironic that the UFO skeptic quoted that as implying that there was nothing unusual, like as if the fact that there was nothing bizarre in my blood was sort of proof that it never happened or something. It's kind of a strange, one of those absence of evidence is evidence of absence kind of fallacies.
Well, I understand that astronauts have changes in their blood.
Oh, really?
And that's why I asked.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But in that recent movie, Travis, that came out here last couple of months, there's an endorsement from an astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Yeah, I was unconscious. So I don't have any memory of that. I don't think they blocked any memory. As a matter of fact, more than unconscious, you know, I was probably clinically dead, you know. The violence of that blast of energy was probably fatal. No, or toileting. Those questions come up, but I'm sure there was because, you know, with 5 days, and the medical tests suggested that there wasn't starvation, because if there's complete starvation, you'll have the presence of ketones in the urine, and that didn't happen. So, but the hydration thing was a little bit deficient. But I've always been somebody who drinks a lot of water, and they may have just underestimated my requirements. Yeah, I did feel some hunger and thirst, yeah. And there was a weight loss of around like 11 pounds. And that was on the home scale, so we actually brought those scales into the doctor's office and compared them. And they were, you know, the doctor's scales, of course, much more precise. And they, you know, correlated with the doctor's scales. So, and this, from the time I was returned to just 24 hours later, much of that weight loss was recovered. So that was an indication that it was mostly dehydration. Yes, I do think that's what they were attempting to do. It just wasn't successful because of the brain injury due to that blast of energy.
So at that point you were absolutely terrified and you were just defending yourself.
Yeah.
So then they left, and then the two humanoids
You encountered the human
Well,
ones.
one came in and took me out of there and left me in the company of 3 others who rendered me unconscious again. And I think probably just because I was out of my mind and flailing around and not being cooperative, that they just had to do that in order to complete the healing.
So do you think if you'd been cool, calm and collected in a situation like that, must have been really difficult, but do you think you would have heard more messages from them or more communication?
Well,
or?
I don't know whether they were silent, and I don't know whether they were psychic or telepathic with each other, but I do think that was the case with the smaller creatures. Oh, I would assume very advanced technology, but I probably, you know, this is just speculation, that they were silent and weren't communicating verbally with each other just because I would get some kind of clue, you know. I suppose they could have learned English and to speak it without any accent that I would identify, but yeah, it could have been just a map room. It could have been something like that rather than a control room. But I don't know, you know, whether it was actually moving the ship or just moving the map. I don't know. No, it was just as stable as I felt no sense of movement. And I didn't hear any sounds of machinery or, you know, those strange sounds that we heard from the outside. I didn't hear anything from the inside. Well, the glow was actually from the craft itself, and they changed it to red in the movie for some reason, but it wasn't. It was a soft golden glow. Well, we thought it was a fire, just you know, because we, you know, it was night, and it was unexpected to see light in the forest at night. You know, normally we're driving home, and unless it's the headlights of another vehicle, you don't see any lights. Yeah. So we were just guessing what the source of the light was, and it was actually the craft. Yeah. I didn't overcome it. I just put up with it.
Have you seen or heard anything that makes you think that all of his friends in such a situation, or yourself, would be given better treatment or a better run of things or belief today? Yeah,
I do think that if a similar report were to happen today, that it would be better than it was back then. I think we are reaching a tipping point. I think general acceptance out there in the general public is on the rise at an all-time high.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine then having a general like this.
They've done surveys that show that the prevalence of belief is now exceeding 50%. I believe those studies were done in the States, but I think it's growing worldwide because I've been contacted from people worldwide. Like I was telling the others earlier, that just in the last month or so, I've gotten friend requests from Tanzania and a country called Moldova, and really out of the way places. You know, right before I left for here, I mailed one book order to Hong Kong, and you know, it's everywhere. I think that it takes a while for the truth to trickle out, you know, that it's just gradually, you know, working its way through the alternative medias. And the mainstream media is something that a lot of people don't really trust. They understand that they have a certain agenda. There's certain things they treat certain ways. But the internet is really responsible for a lot of increase in understanding because people trust, you know, independent sources. Although, you know, everybody knows that there's a lot of nonsense on the internet too. They've learned how to sort through it. And I think that's an important part of the increase in acceptance that's going on. And in my case in particular, a lot of the disinformation that was put out has fallen by the way just because people, you know, caught on to what the deceptions were. They didn't show any interest, but I'm certain they had it. You know, there were the government crew that came through the following summer doing magnetic readings on the ground. This was witnessed by a local reporter for the White Mountain Independent. And, you know, those kind of surveys are normally done aerially, but they were doing it in the area, the immediate area, on foot. And so I think that was a follow-up to the magnetic anomalies that were discovered by the UFO group that came in, charted out the group, and found, you know, these high Gauss readings and even the polarity reversal in the direction that the craft had left. So I do think there's been a lot of interest, but it's covert. For them to show up in full military garb and knock on my door and in front of the whole community would be sort of a confirmation of things they don't want to do. So if they were going to make a government inquiry, it would either be, you know, by covert surveillance or maybe sending in someone that was ostensibly a reporter, just doing an in-depth story, but was really asking the questions that they wanted answered. So nothing overt, but probably plenty of covert stuff.
Do you think that the ones on the craft would come and do a checkup and see how you're going on?
Well, it'd be kind of interesting. Wouldn't it be fun to think that, you know, they're looking out for me? But I don't know. Or just, you're on your own now, kid.
Thank you.
Thank you.